As always, history and heritage go hand in hand. Now, history tells us about hardships and certain struggles that we've learned from the past. It shows us where we've come from before and what we have come to today. And in terms of heritage, well, that shows us the different values that we hold true, that we like to carry forward to generations in the future. And especially when you consider a motorcycle brand like BSA, in terms of history and heritage, well, the company is rich in those two very aspects. Now, not a lot of people know about this brand or the rich heritage and the history that is involved with this BSA brand. So in this review, I'm going to touch upon these subjects while also explaining to you what the GoldStar is all about, because that in essence is what the GoldStar 650 is in today's world. Now, not a lot of people actually know about the legacy behind brand BSA because this is in fact a company that has been around for more than 100 years. 1903 it was established. So primarily BSA, which is Birmingham Small Arms Company Limited, was started in the late 1800s. It primarily made arms and ammunition for the UK and provided them with artillery. But then again, it had to be enterprising, find different ways of making more money, and it transitioned from making cycles to a motorcycle division in 1903, and finally by 1910 it came out with its first motorcycle. Now, over the course of time, throughout the world wars and in the periods in between, it grew tremendously in stature, so much so that by around 1950s, well, it was the largest manufacturer of motorcycles in the world. At one point, even owning Triumph motorcycles and joining a joint venture with Norton motorcycles. According to statistics, well, 1 of every 4 motorcycles in the world at that era was in fact a BSA motorcycle. So that in its own is crazy. But then again, sadly, its fame didn't really last, because by the 1970s, some mismanagement calls led to the company filing for bankruptcy, and by 1973 they had to shut shop for good, ending a non-stop run of over 60 years of productions of motorcycles. So that was really sad. In 2016, the Mahindra Group, a subsidiary which is Classic Legends, took over the reins of BSA, becoming the custodian of the brand and revived it. So much so that in 2022, they brought out this motorcycle. The same 650 GoldStar that you see here was launched in the UK. Now, as you may know, that motorcycle has taken quite a while to get here, but look at it in all its grandeur, and we are really happy that it actually has. And there's a lot more to this motorcycle that actually meets the eye. There's a lot of history behind it as well, and that we're going to get into right now. So in terms of design of this new GoldStar 650, you might have heard a lot of talk about this new motorcycle trying to mimic, well, the design and aspirational values of the older generation of motorcycles. And for your visual delight, I have with me out here today a 1959 DBD34. And as you can see, in really pristine condition in terms of design, how similar they actually are.
The color scheme of this new Legends Edition model is quite similar to what you had in the bikes of old. The sizable fenders on both ends, particularly the holdings on the rear, look quite similar. So does the round halogen headlamp, the front suspension with the fork covers. I love the twin pod readout that's modelled after the old Smith's dials, and although it's a lovely old school touch, I'm not particularly a fan of the way these new needles move about. While the old bikes had a headlight mounted ammeter, you now have a small circular display which shows you all the warning and indication lights, which is neat touch indeed. And it doesn't end just there. Moving a little further back, you'll notice a similarity in the form of a double cradle chassis. The fins on the engine blockhead, which mimic the old air-cooled engine, even though this new motor is liquid-cooled. They've also tried to replicate the old engine side casings, which are a good throwback to the Goldies of a bygone era. I also think that the 150 section tyre on the 17 at the rear adds some much desired brawn to the rear of the bike as well. Overall, I find the new bike to be extremely neat and tidy, but I do have some niggles about some bits on there. One being the fact that the fenders aren't made of metal. 2, I find the digital readouts on those meters to be a little tiny and odd looking. And 3, as far as the branding is concerned, besides the side panels, the 3 cross rifles or at least the BSA insignia on the engine covers should have been etched on there instead of being stickers. Also, something unique that Classic Legends has done with the BSA is moved the oil sump to under the seat, behind the side panel, which is great because it has lowered the bike's center of gravity, lowered the seat height as well. But strangely, these side panels aren't lockable, So you'll have to be discreet when you remove the one on the left and pull a cord to take out the seat to access any bike documents that you have stored under there, or even change your engine oil. Carry out these exercises often, and the rubber that holds these panels back in place could wear out.
Now, even in the past, these BSA motorcycles were known for their precise machine bits and, of course, their long stroke single cylinder engines, which were considered high performance engines back in the day. Now, BSA did produce a lot of motorcycles for the army, but there were a lot of civilian units as well. And when you have high performance machines and civilians in the same sentence, there's only one natural outcome. Well, civilians are going to go racing, and that paved the way for a lot of aftermarket bits, race kits and the like. Now, this motorcycle stays true in that real tradition because this single cylinder 650cc engine, it produces 45 PS of max power, 55 Nm of max torque, and above 3,500 RPM, this thing just wants to fly. While the motorcycle might look to be a lazy cruiser style motorcycle, well, it really proves otherwise. Above 3,000 RPM, it just wants to take off, and it's really entertaining and good fun out on the road.
The old BSA GoldStars were mighty fast back in the day. I mean, speed had pretty much everything to do with the name GoldStar in the first place. It all began with a British motorcycle racer named Walter Hanley earning himself a Brooklyn's Gold Star Award by lapping the pioneering Bank circuit in Surrey with a top speed of 107 miles per hour astride a 500cc BSA Empire Star back in 1937. Now, BSA drew inspiration from this outstanding achievement and came out with its first M24 GoldStar model the following year. So, every GoldStar model that came out from that point on had to be capable of achieving, if anything, that feat at least. Now, you'll actually be surprised as to how refined this double overhead cam engine is. Its balancer shaft with the helical gear and the high inertia magnet keep the NVH levels down to acceptable levels. In true old school fashion, there's some lovely vibes to be felt with this one, and it'll only get a bit bothersome once you cross the 130 kmph mark. But the way this bike pulls from low down the power band is just awesome. There's a lovely wave of torque to ride from as low as 2500 RPM, and the engine is pretty tractable too, allowing you to chug along just fine at city speeds in third gear. Even though there's just 5 gears on this Goldie, you won't really miss 6th with the way things are laid out. You'll be cruising at 80 km per hour at around 3000 RPM in 5th, which is a complete vibe. Or even 100 km per hour at 4000 RPM, the bike feels like it's just getting started if you're ready to throw down the gauntlet. Even a 0 to 100 sprint time feels brisk, and at one occasion I even managed to see 100 km per hour on an open stretch before running out of road. And it felt like there was a little more in there as well, which is fantastic. So there's no denying this 650 is a real gold star.
Now, some might think that this is the first time India is actually seeing its first 650cc single cylinder engine, but on that count you would be wrong, because this is not the first time. In fact, previously we have seen the same sort of engine in the BMW 650 Funduro. Now, obviously, times have changed and the motor has undergone a substantial amount of change to keep up with emissions norms. But once again, this is not the first time that we are seeing this engine.
The Funduro was brought to and sold in India by Hero back in the late 90s, and it was a far cry from everything else that was actually sold out here at the time. There's so much to talk about the F650 because you could consider this to be the first proper adventure bike that was actually sold in India, although it wasn't made here. But now's not the time to get into it. Back to the BSA. The new GoldStar 650 is a very comfortable bike to be astride, for 2-up as well. The seat height is at an accessible 780 mm, and the seat itself is long and more importantly flat with neutral foot controls. The wide handlebar gives you great leverage, and its angling makes it really comfortable to reach as well. Unlike with a twin cylinder with a broader lower mid section, well, this single cylinder GoldStar is nice and narrow, so putting your foot down when you come to a halt is very comfortable too. If you're riding at a leisurely pace, keeping the engine bubbling at around 2500 RPM, there's a real sense of nostalgia that sinks in. The way the torque kicks in, the way you're seated, the way the bike feels and sounds is just brilliant. If you've ridden an 80s or early 90s model bike before, well, this one does take you back quite a bit. Now, the slip and assist clutch does have a bit of weight to it, but I think that it's definitely lighter than the unit on the RE Interceptor. So not only does this GoldStar look very retro, it feels so too, with hints of modernity thrown in where you'd actually want it as well, which is great if you're into this style of motorcycles. In the handling department, the bike does fairly well. It behaves just the way you'd expect a bike with a 1425mm wheelbase to behave. It's stable in a straight line and will take to long sweeping bends like a fish to water. The way the suspension irons out bumps is commendable, and thankfully it's not one that's so stiff that it'll buck you off if you hit a rough patch as well. The Brembo brakes, well, they do a good job, and the Pirelli Phantom Sport tyres are sufficient at what they're meant to do too. But you'll want to be mindful of any rough patches because I felt that the Continental ABS setup kicks in quite early. And this combined with the weight of the bike, which is 213 kgs, will fill your stomach with butterflies when you're on some rough patches and you have to drop anchor quick. Now, the old GoldStar models were simple, reliable machines that were easy to fix. Now, only time will tell about the reliability aspect about this new GoldStar 650 because it's a fairly new bike. Plus, there's also the fact that Classic Legends has a limited and selected sales and service network for this brand. So, that will be a defining factor in your purchasing decision. These BSA bikes were meant to be fast, simple, and good looking, and in that light, I think the new GoldStar 650 manages to pull it off really well. Now, as far as the pricing is concerned, the BSA GoldStar's pricing starts from 3 lakh rupees and goes up to 3.35 lakh rupees for this color variant. Now, some will see it as being a bit on the expensive side, seeing as its main competition is a twin-cylinder 650cc motorcycle and is less costly. But at this price point, you're not just simply buying into a brand and a motorcycle, you're buying into heritage and a pivotal part of history. When you ride it, there's just this sense of emotion that's evoked, and you'll simply have to ride one to experience it.
Now, to conclude matters, the BSA GoldStar that we have out here today, the 650, well, it is a brilliant transition from the old legacy motorcycles, the old motorcycles down to the new generation. The Mahindra Group, or Classic Legends, has done a spectacular job because this is a high quality machine that still maintains a good amount of pace, precision and, well, beauty. So yes, they have done a good job. And although this motorcycle is on the pricier side compared to something like the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650, well, we will save our judgment for that, which is the better model. We will have a review on these two quite soon, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you back on the channel soon.